In this video, we're going to cover the process of generating terrain in World Machine. Now, not necessarily the actual World Machine process, but how do we take that information that exports from World Machine, including the height map and some different masks for pre-painting different sections on our map, and how do we get that into Unreal seamlessly without any errors? So that's what I want to cover in this video. So let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so before we get started, just a couple things to get out of the way. So this video is not about using World Machine. That's not what this is about. In fact, this video isn't even sponsored by World Machine. I use World Machine. I like it. I know that there's a few other programs out there, which I've used as well. The point what I want to make with this video is just to show you how you take your terrain data, that is your height map, and the different masks that you want to create in an external program, and how do we get that working in Unreal Engine. So that's the primary focus of this one. So we're not going to get caught up in the minutia and all the little details of using World Machine. Rather, I'm just going to show you the principles. So that being said, let's start. All right, so this is the terrain that we're using. So you can see it's pretty basic. There's nothing fancy. This is pretty much these nodes right here. So our purlin, curves, erosion. That's simply just generating our terrain, which is what we need. The other thing that we're going to use, and this is a workflow with World Machine, is that it's node-based, which means that we can output different things. So, for example, I've got my height output. I've got this right here, which is just some splat maps. And then I've got various different, black and white masks, for all intents and purposes, of different things. I'm going to highlight the flow. We'll show this in Unreal when we get there, because I think this is really good. It's easy to see. But that's literally it. I'm not going to go over, how to generate these. The point is, I'm assuming that you're watching this because you already have some of that data. You simply just want to get that into Engine. So that being said, all right, so the first thing I want to do is just show you the project setup itself. So in World Machine, now I have a paid license. If you don't, you'll have yours capped to, I think, 513 by 513 resolution. That's not the point. The point is that I'm generating this particular piece of terrain at 2049 by 2049 with the +1 checked, which means technically if I uncheck it, 2048 by 2048 with the +1. Okay, so that is our overall resolution for this terrain. So keep that number in the back of your mind. I'll show you where that comes into Unreal. The next thing is that my height output, so if I double click this, you'll see that I've got this, I'm outputting as a high precision 16-bit raw 16. So you're going to need, if you look at your file extension, a .r16. That is a raw 16. That is what we need for our height input going into Unreal. And then finally, I'm going to just show you one of these. In fact, all of these have the same setting on them, that I'm outputting an 8-bit raw file. That is what we're going to use in Unreal to automatically paint the different sections that we want. You can hang with me, I'll show you here. So that's all you need for your output. Okay, so that goes out. Let's go jump over to Unreal and I'll show you the setup here and actually the first problem we're going to run into. So let's jump over to Unreal and show that real quick. All right, so now that we're in Unreal, I've got a very basic scene. There is nothing fancy in the scene whatsoever. I've just got a sky, directional light, and I've balanced it so it's easier to see. But for all intents and purposes, this is just a starting blank scene. So I'm going to go over to my modes panel. I'm going to go to our landscape. I'm going to click this guy, and then you'll probably have yours set at create new, and this is what this will look like. Of course, we don't want to necessarily create a new flat terrain. We want to use the information that we just exported out from World Machine, or whatever program you're using, to input that. So I'm going to go ahead and go to import file. Now in this case, I've already specified the file path, but let's just open it and I'll show you. So there is that output.r16. So that's the file that we're going to use for our terrain elevation. We'll go ahead and open it. There we go. Now your setup may look a little bit different. I've got a material that I've used here that I've set up so we can visualize what's happening here. The point to know is that you don't need a material to do this. In fact, you could have nothing, and that's fine. Your terrain will still create. It'll still generate. You can come back and add this material at any point in time. So don't worry about this. You don't have to have this set up, but to save time on this video, I've already preset it up, so don't worry about that. Okay, so we have our terrain file. We've got the height map, and notice here, this is that height map resolution. So this is that 2049 by 2049 that was associated in World Machine. So that's our output. Okay, so that's the first thing that we want to do. So I'll go ahead and do, I'll add this. The next thing, now, I can't confirm on other programs per se, but I know that with World Machine, I think, I'm theorizing here, I don't know if this is exactly what's happening, but the height range in Unreal can take values from 0 to 1024 and from 0 to negative 1024. So that gives us overall resolution. However, World Machine is taking it as 2048 from a 0 point, so it's building it upwards. So if you bring your terrain in just by default and you use the default here of scale 100, you'll notice that this is very, very extreme. Our elevation is huge. So I find when you're importing, go ahead and set your scale to 100 to 100, take your Z to 50. That will compress it down and get you visually what should associate with what you're seeing in Unreal. Okay, so to recap, you select your height file, import from file. We take this, it will automatically propagate all of these settings here. Change your scale, so you've got 100, 150, and that should get you the right size visually. And then you'll notice here all of these different sections. I'm not going to cover these because we're importing from a file, this is automatically propagated in there. Okay, so we've got this. Now before I click the hit create, and you can see the awesomeness and wonderfulness, which you've probably already done, I want you to take note of this overall resolution, this 2160 by 2160. This is very important, which is going to lead me into the first issue that we're going to have. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and import. It will automatically calculate, and there we go. There is our terrain, which is beautiful. This is why you use external programs, because you get this kind of detail. It would take forever to hand sculpt this. Okay, now it's in, and we're ready to do the next process, which is I want to go ahead and pre-paint some of my layers. And what I mean by that is, so in our modes panel in the landscape, I'm going to go over to paint. Now this is where, if you've ever used a landscape tool, this is how you can paint the different materials. Now this video is not going to cover that setup process. We'll do that in another video. But the thing to note is that when you create your material, you're going to create different layers, right? You can do rock, sand, cliff sides, grass, whatever it is. And you want to paint that. Now, there's two ways you can do this. You can do it by hand, so you can click your paint tool, select the different layer that you want, go in and paint the, every individual section, or we can leverage those maps. If you recall earlier when we exported some of those masks, we can use those to go ahead and automatically start the painting process for it. Of course, we can always go back, we can erase it, we can add more, that's totally fine. So that's what we're gonna do here in this section. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna go ahead, and I've already set this up ahead of time, but if you are adding your material and you're going in and you're like, hey, I can't paint anything, it's because you need layer info nodes, which you could click plus, add one of these here, but again, I've already set this up. So I'm just gonna put one in our plains, and you'll see our terrain turn green because now we have information. I'm gonna go into our water and set this up as well. So there we go. So I've got these two. Okay, so if I go in here, I can select my paint tool, select the water, and tool strength, brush size, super small. There we go. So now I've got my water. Okay, hideous. All right. So this is going to be the first issue that you're going to encounter. So I don't want to paint this. I simply want to just fill this layer based off that mask. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to do import from file. So we'll navigate back, and I want to use that flow. So if you remember, that's just the different water. So I'm going to go ahead and click my flow output.raw, open it, and boom. Layer does not match the current landscape extent. Again, if you remember, our landscape resolution inside of World Machine was 2049 by 2049. However, when we imported it into Unreal with the component size and everything that was associated, it's now 2160 by 2160. So we can't use this. So if I click OK, you'll see here, I don't actually get any information. Okay, so how do we fix that? That's gonna bring us to the next point, which is we need to add some information to those raw files. So to do that, I'm just going to use Photoshop. You can use GIMP, you can use whatever you want. The point is that we need to increase the resolution of that mask. So let's go ahead and jump over and do that right now. All right, so now that I'm in Photoshop, all I've done is I've simply just opened this .raw file. Now you may get a little pop-up dialog that says, hey, here's some raw import settings. All you need to do is keep it at default. We don't need to change anything. This is simply just that file in its raw state. Okay, so what do we actually need to do with this? So if you recall that the size of this, let me go ahead and just open up the image size. The image size of our .raw file is 2049 by 2049, but we need to match it to our terrain size, which is 2160 by 2160. So you may think, oh, I'm just gonna go into image size. I'm gonna take it in pixels and go ahead and take this up to 2160 by 2160 and simply rescale it up. That is incorrect. So let me go ahead and undo this. We'll take it back down to our size of 2049 by 2049. Okay, so what do we need to do? Well, let me jump back over to Unreal real quick and show you what's happening here. So this is our terrain, but if you notice, there's some of this stretching on the outside. So if I zoom in here a little bit, you can see. So what Unreal is doing is taking our terrain size 2049 by 2049 and adding this extra border information around it. So what we need to do is not necessarily scale our image up because it will fill outside of that, but we need to add this border. So the difference between 2160 and 2049, we need to add that as a border. So we'll jump back over to Photoshop real quick and I'll show you what we need to do. So I'm gonna go up to image, and instead of image size, I want canvas size. So I wanna change my canvas from 2049 to 2160 by 2160. Leave the anchor in the middle. So what this is going to do is expand the canvas. So I'm gonna go ahead and click OK. And now we get our border. Now in this case, it's white. If I hit undo, there's an easy way to correct this. In Photoshop, it's your background color. So we'll just flop them, or you can press X. So we have black as our background. Go back up to canvas size, same thing, scale it up to 2160 by 2160, hit OK. And now we have that border. Now, that's all you need to do with this. Now you can do this by hand. You can create an action if you're not familiar with that. Basically, you can record a process that you do and just apply it to multiple images, and that's it. Go ahead and save this back out as your raw file. Now I'm not going to do it here because I've already done that ahead of time, but that's it. That's literally what you need to do. You need to add this border around it to match the image size in Unreal. So with that being said, now that we have our actual our raw files for the mask set appropriately, so now they're 2160 by 2160, let's jump back over to Unreal and continue the process that we had before. So I'll zoom back in here and go to my paint tab. So if you recall, we've got our paint layer info nodes on both of these. I'm going to leave green as the base, and I'm going to paint into this water. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to do import from file, which you can see it's here, but let's go ahead and just do import from file. And I've created a new directory, so our 2160 by 2160, which is literally what we just did in Photoshop. And I'm gonna click my flow output, give it a second, no error message, and then we should see that painted directly onto our terrain. So I think that is pretty evident why using the masks is so powerful. Now, of course, I can go in here at any point. Let's take our brush size down just a bit so it's not so big. And I can actually paint more than information or remove more than information. So I still have full control over these different layers, but instead of me having to paint all this by hand, we've simply used our layers. So that's literally it. That is the process of you getting your terrain out from World Machine or anything else, importing it into Unreal. And again, the key here is when you go into, let's go ahead and do this. We'll just create a new landscape. The key thing that you need to take note of is this overall resolution. So your data that's exported from whatever program you use, take note of your overall resolution. Go into Photoshop, go into whatever, add your border on the back. That will get you the padding around the outside. And then you can simply from that point go into your layers, add your layer info nodes, and then right click on it. And you can do import from file, import those resize R16s, and that's it. I'm sorry, R8s. They're raw 8s. They're not R16s. And that's it. That's how you can get your terrain set up and, of course, create your materials any way that you want. So that will wrap up for this video. So, again, I really appreciate you guys' support. I know things have been absolutely crazy lately. So we'll continue to do this. And, again, it's always, I always say this, too. You don't have to subscribe. You don't have to like. You don't have to dislike. It's totally fine. These resources are here for you. But subscribing and liking definitely goes a long way to helping support this channel. So I really do appreciate all your guys' support. That'll wrap it up for this video. Thanks, guys. Catch you on the next one.